by World War One. He does care about the big things, but he just doesn't trust himself to judge them or them not to hurt him. Consider this passage. Robert Jordan looking at Maria. Maybe it was like that. Maybe you would be afraid to touch her to see if it was true. Maybe you would, and probably it is something that you made up or that you dreamed. He took a step across the trail and put his hand on the girl's arm. Under his fingers he felt the smoothness of her arm in the warm khaki. She looked at him and smiled. "Hello, Maria," he said. "Hello, Ingles," she answered, and he saw her tawny brown face, and the yellow-grey eyes and the full lips smiling and the cropped sunburned hair, and she lifted her face at him and smiled in his eyes. It was true, all right. So, come on now. Is this really the domineering model of man that we're culturally so intent to cram Hemingway into? Robert Jordan is afraid to believe that Maria even exists, let alone that she loves him. And the only way he can be assured of it is through direct and simple touch. Only that is simple and kind of atomic enough that he feels it will not deceive him. This is not, a large man striding into the middle of the room, exposing hairy chest and in a rumbling bass, glorifying womanizing and drinking. It's someone cowering in a corner, hidden behind a table, afraid and confused and trying, in a shaky voice, to tell us something true, that he may be of some good. I'm freshly heartbroken every time I see this misread, and every time I hear Hemingway, he's so male. Of course, because this book is so vulnerable, and I've known so many boys who have suffered because fearing something is taken as spurning, and so many who have suffered on the point from earlier because a reticence about emotion, a reluctance to talk about emotion, is taken as a disregard for it or a lack of it. And I know I don't want all these kind of sad men and boys we have. I think we should pay them some attention if we can spare it. Hemingway's dad killed himself and Hemingway killed himself, and I know that was partly because he had brain damage and it was maybe kind of euthanasia in some way from the plane crash, but we clearly don't have the solution to boys killing themselves, so we may as well pay attention. Yeah, so let me drink some water. I didn't mean to sound like I was telling you off there. Sorry if I did. The book is not about Jordan's ability to conquer, but his ability to make peace with being conquered, with reconciliation to his weakness. I can't say I noticed this in my own response. This is what the commentary suggested, but I've since seen it. Those sublimists thought similarly. And by the way, all my knowledge of the sublime movement comes from Alain de Botton's How to Travel. For credit, he has Burke's a sublimist. Burke was categorical. Sublimity had to do with a feeling of weakness. A landscape could arouse the sublime only when it suggested power greater than that of humans and threatening to them. Sublime places embodied a defiance to our will. Then there was a passage of a sublimist explaining how an ox is not sublime because though strong, it's obedient to us, and how a bull is sublime because it's indifferent and dangerous to us. And I was cutting that bit out of this because I thought it was kind of boring. But then I realised, bulls. They're in Hemingway. And I'd always skip those parts in Hemingway, really. Well, not skip, but like skimmed, because they're kind of boring. But now I'm thinking maybe there is something more to them. They are the sublime. They're things stronger than us and indifferent to us. More de Botton. Then there were bull-like landscapes. Burke enumerated their features. Bull-like, as in an ox-like landscape, might be pleasant, but like English rolling fields or something. Burke enumerated the features of bull-like landscapes: vast, empty, often dark, and apparently infinite. He says of what seeing these things brings to us: one answer is that not everything which is more powerful than us must always be hateful to us. We begrudge the defiance of the cocky doorman. We honour the defiance of the mist-shrouded mountain. We are humiliated by what is powerful and mean, but awed by what is powerful and noble. To return to and extend Burke's animal analogy, a bull may arouse a feeling of the sublime. A piranha does not. It seems a matter of motives. We interpret the piranha's power as vicious and predatory, the bull's as guileless and impersonal. Sublime landscapes do not, therefore, introduce us to our inadequacy. Rather, to touch on the crux of their appeal, they allow us to conceive of a familiar inadequacy in a new and more helpful way. Sublime places repeat in grand terms a lesson that ordinary life typically teaches viciously: that the universe is mightier than we are, that we are frail and temporary and have no alternative but to accept limitations on our will, that we must bow to necessities greater than ourselves. Interestingly, he notes that interest in the sublime rose exactly as religious belief fell, suggesting that God and religion used to provide us with this feeling of something bigger and outside our control. Asked to explain to Job why he has been made to suffer, though he has been good, God draws Job's attention to the mighty phenomena of nature. Do not be surprised that things have not gone your way. The universe is greater than you. Do not be surprised that you do not understand why they have not gone their way, for you cannot fathom the logic of the universe. See how small you are next to the mountains. Accept what is bigger than you, and you do not understand. It's meant to leave us, not crushed, but inspired by what lies beyond us, privileged to be subject to such majestic necessities, bringing us to accept without bitterness or lamentation the obstacles we cannot overcome and events we cannot make sense of. Help us to accept more graciously the great unfathomable events that molest our lives and will inevitably return us to dust. So this book is about the sublime twice then. First, the plot is about a character facing things more powerful than and indifferent to him, all the way up to the big one, death. And also the emotion, feeling, being so infinite, as we discussed before, is like a sublime landscape in itself. It's kind of vast and bigger than our comprehension, and yeah. I said that I didn't recognise this much in my own reading, but then I went back to my notes from that holiday in America, and I did have which was the first time I ever felt the kind of deep, quiet feeling. And I found this from, 18-year-old me, that celebrated scholar, who said, "I love Yosemite. There is a peacefulness and the nature is beautiful. The top of Glacier Point and the walk down was the most beautiful thing I think I'd ever seen. The scale is breathtaking. We stood a mile away from El Capitan, but because it was so big, I couldn't comprehend it being a mile away. I kept perceiving it as very close, because if something's closer, it can be bigger by perspective. It's 3 times taller than the Empire State Building. I think the scale is an unrelenting reminder of one's insignificance, making it easier to access." And then I sadly ruin it by saying, "to access some of that existential nonchalance I cherish so dearly." It's not nonchalance. I was just young and a bit of a cunt, and I hadn't really seen proper suffering. But well, it's not miles off. What it is reconciliation, solace, comfort, company, and it can be peace, and yet it can also be some cheerfulness too. We don't have to be miserable and kind of grimly accepting these things. There definitely is some lightness available there. That, as Hildebrand Jacob, another sublimist, much more eloquently said, he said, "Man seems merely dust postponed. The sublime is an encounter pleasurable, intoxicating even, with human weakness in the face of the strength, age, and size of the universe." So that's at least one suggestion, that whole thing, for what we're feeling when we're so silent at the end of the book. And yeah, perhaps it has something to do with reconciling ourselves to our limits. But anyway, that's the refuge part, and if you want more of that, I think it's visible across Hemingway's work, but most realised in For Whom the Bell Tolls. But if you want it in short story form, go for The Big Two-Hearted River, which alongside 10 Indians that I mentioned earlier are definitely my two favourite of his short stories. And also The 3-Day Blow I really like, but that's not relevant here. So I'll conclude. I am grateful to Hemingway. He has given us something vast, beautiful, and true. I asked you to monitor how your concept of truth changed through this book in the pre-read, and maybe now you agree with Faulkner, Hemingway's rival, that fiction is often the best fact, and maybe, and we'll think of the Spanish Civil War here, maybe you agree with Picasso when he said, "Art is a lie that makes us realize the truth." This book details only one small band of guerrillas for only 3 days, but it tells us so much about the Spanish Civil War. It tells us so much about Europe and America in the interwar post-Depression period. It tells us so much about death, love, and humanity. It tells us so much about ourselves. In the particular is contained the universal. Further reading and cultural pairings: Toni Morrison's Beloved, Tolstoy's War and Peace, of Hemingway novels A Farewell to Arms and A Movable Feast, of Hemingway short story collections In Our Time and Men Without Women, of paintings Rothko's Seagram murals, for the sublime, an example, but there's probably better ones, Philip James de Loutherbourg, An Avalanche in the Alps, and of course Picasso's Guernica. For music, Bob Dylan's Blood on the Tracks and Mozart's 41st Symphony. Thank you so much. I'll see you in a week.